pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another page 112 tag, and this was a special new variation. Slightly tweaked, which I think could be a really popular variation, but let's see how it goes. I haven't explained the page 112 tag in detail for a while. For those of you that have been watching for a while, you can fast forward about a minute, but I've had a lot of new subscribers recently, so let me give the little spiel. This is based on a French literary prize where the judges create a short list out of a long list by evaluating page 112 only from the novel, which they receive without any identifying information about title or author. They just receive page 112, and from that they choose the short list. The thinking behind it is writers and their editors and their publishers spend a lot of time gussying up the first chapter and maybe the first 50 pages, the first 100 pages, but everybody kind of slacks off after that. So if you want to really get a sense of how good a book is, go to page 112. It's random, but go to page 112, and if you like the writing there, if you're drawn into the story there, that's a good way to judge the literary merit of any particular book. It's an annual prize out of France, la Prix de page 112, the page 112 prize. And several months ago on BookTube, I adapted this as it's not really a tag video per se, although it's open for anybody to do, and several other booktubers have done it. And there are several variations. This is the totally blind variation, so I'll let you read about the other variations in the show notes. Okay, that's enough. But this is the totally blind variation, where a subscriber or fellow booktuber has sent me 3 page 112s without any identifying information, and I'm going to read them to you, give my spontaneous reactions to them without having even so much as previewed them beforehand, and then rank them according to what I'm most interested in, 1, 2, and 3. At the end of the video, I'm going to log back on to my email and check the email that identifies the titles and authors and have some follow-up discussion. The point of this is my reactions might be interesting to you. You may or may not agree with my reactions, but what are your reactions, and which of these books would you like to read? So it's very viewer-centered, I think. People seem to like it. This is a special blind page 112 because these are all Booker Prize nominees. My friend, the wonderful booktuber, her new channel name is Peg the Book Prize Addict. Let me just pause and say, if you don't follow Peg the Book Prize Addict, what's wrong with you? It's definitely one of my favorite channels on BookTube. The title says it all. She, I think exclusively, reads book prize from around the world. She reads book prize, long lists, and short lists, and I think she reads every single one on the long list most of the time, and then makes these fabulous chatty videos about what she's reading, and her channel is just an utter delight, so you must check her out. So she has sent me 3 page 112s from one particular year of the Booker, including the winner, but 2 other, presumably from the short list or maybe the long list, I don't know. I'll find out at the end of the video. So I'm going to read them to you now, and then I will give you my reactions, and we'll go from there. And she said she would be delighted to do this on an ongoing basis. This is the 50th anniversary of the Booker Prize this year, so to kind of commemorate that, I think we're going to do a series of these. And again, I am not in any way holding myself out as an expert. My reactions may or may not be of interest or jibe with yours, but this is a chance for you to get a little taste of some Booker Prize nominated novels and see which ones you might like to read. So without further ado, here is book number 1, and I am really excited. The door of Barbara's room was open, and Mary saw through the doorway the intent, preoccupied profile of her son as he bent down and peered through horn-rimmed spectacles at the surface of the large table in the window. Pierce, brown-complexioned, brown-haired, brown-eyed, possessed a large nose which descended in a straight line from his brow, giving to his plump, waxen face a somewhat animal quality. An impulse to stroke him down over brow and nose like a pony had already troubled in health-conscious form a number of people, including some of his masters at school. He had a serious, staring gaze which, together with a slow, pedantic habit of speech, gave him the air of an intellectual. In fact, though clever, he was idle at school and far from bookish. Mary, still unseen, moved closer, and saw that Pierce had covered the table with a complicated pattern composed of hundreds of shells arranged in spirals, tiny ones in the center, larger ones on the outside. Adjusting the outer edge of the pattern, he stopped to select a shell from a heap at his feet. Pierce became aware of his mother and turned slowly to face her. He rarely moved fast. He looked at her without smiling, almost grimly. He looked at her like an animal, cornered but not frightened, a dangerous, confident animal. But Mary apprehended herself as a thin, dark woman, a mother, a representative somehow of the past, of Pierce's past, confronting him as if she were already a ghost. Well, that's very interesting. I am very curious about the story. I can't decide if I like the writing. I think I like the writing for one page, but I'm not sure how I'd feel after 50 pages of this writing style. So that my gut feeling is I could easily grow tired of this writing style. It's not the vocabulary, but it's the pile-on of adjectives, the intent, preoccupied profile, plump, waxen face. I think, but for one page, I think I'm okay with it. Like, there's plump, waxen face, that's vivid. Intent, preoccupied profile, maybe it's okay, but I can't decide how I would feel without reading a longer passage. Whatever's going on here, the mum kind of sneaking up on her son, who seems quite young, student. Definitely he's kind of described as a child. Who is Barbara? The door of Barbara's room was open. Maybe that's a daughter. So there's Pierce and his mum Mary and whoever Barbara is. I'm interested in this pattern he's making of the shells, and that's curious and very well described. I like the sentence, he looked at her like an animal, cornered but not frightened, a dangerous, confident animal. Then she envisioned her own self as a thin, dark woman, confronting him as if she were... Yeah, I like it. I'm just not sure about the writing style over a longer, by the time I get to the middle of the book or the end of the book, will I be sick of the writing or not? I don't know, but I'm certainly it grabs me. To a certain degree, it grabs me. So that's my reaction to book number 1. Here is book number 2. Does Ellie have Greek friends? Townrow repeated. He wasn't like that. He didn't care whether they were Greek or British or German. He was just a businessman. Townrow clicked his fingers. Now, you know what I mean. He always used to say he didn't understand belonging to different nations and countries. He was an internationalist. He used to say he was born in the Ottoman Empire, and this made him a real cosmopolitan. He used to laugh about his Lebanese passport. Arabs, Jews, Turks, Armenians, Greeks, Syrians, Egyptians. He didn't care. He would do business with anybody. But if he sold coals to the devil to stoke the fires of hell, he'd know it was the devil. You haven't answered my question. They were finishing a restaurant meal on a veranda overhanging a street. Mrs. K had a long line of grape pips lined up on the side of her plate. She was flicking them over the rail. Look, I'll be candid. I'm fed up with all these Egyptians and Greeks and Turks and Italians and whatnot. So far as I'm concerned, they're interchangeable. Ellie would agree with my point of view on this, but of course he couldn't express it like I do. After all, he was one of the foreigners himself. I don't get it. He was a very sharp man, but he was simple-minded about some things. He saw the world as just a lot of people buying and selling. Okay, this one doesn't grab me as much, but unfortunately it's really heavy on the dialogue, and I can't really judge how interested I am in a piece of fiction by reading a passage that's heavy on dialogue. But what little there is that's not dialogue, I quite like the description of them, Townrow and Mrs. K, on the restaurant veranda. Like, to me, those two sentences are really quite nice. Mrs. K had a long line of grape pips. What is a grape pip? Anyway, had a long line of grape pips lined up on the side of her plate. She was flicking them over the rail. Is that the little stem thing? Is that a grape pip? I don't know. But anyway, I can still, whatever it is, I can just picture her throwing them over the rail. So on the basis of that, I think I like it. There's a lot of prose, so it's some kind of international business man. I don't know what to make of it. Mrs. K sounds like a opinionated redneck. And they're talking about Ellie, who is not presumably white. He's one of these foreigners himself. I don't like Mrs. K. I'm interested to find out who Ellie is, but if it's a heavily business-oriented story, I don't think it would be for me, but kind of mixed reaction to this, but not turned off. Once I hear more about the book, I might be able to tell more. But yeah, I can see that there's some vivid writing and too much dialogue for my taste to be able to know. And here is book number 3. In fact, his decision about what parts he was suited to perform on the stage of the theater did not matter. He was never considered for any parts in the plays he wanted to act in. By the time he was 29 years of age, his undoubted talent had been tested only a few times in small productions, and then no more. His mind took the inward turns of a spiral staircase, viewing from every altitude and point of contortion the unblemished, untried fact of his talent. In reality, Frederick was an untrained intellectual. Perhaps he was never happier in his life than in those long mornings at home while reading various literature on the theme of the Dance of Death, and annotating Strindberg, while Annabel was at the studios or was working out of the country for a few weeks with her meager skill and many opportunities to exercise it. He thought of her as doing something far different from anything he wanted to do. She always agreed with him in this, being uncertain, anyway, what he meant. When he talked of creating a role, she agreed with whatever he said about it, because it was something she had heard continually since she attended the School of Drama. Everyone spoke of creating a role and of great acting. She had very little apprehension of what they meant. In practice, her own instinctive method of acting consisted in playing herself in a series of poses for the camera, just as if she were getting her photograph taken for private purposes. She became skilled at this. She became extremely expert. Okay, well, I like that one. And that is all exposition, but the writing is, to me, that's the best writing of the 3. There's lots to sink my teeth into. I love the turns of phrase. This maybe is my favorite sentence. His mind took the inward turn of a spiral staircase, viewing from every altitude and point of contortion the unblemished, untried fact of his talent. That is a great sentence. Are they married, Frederick and Annabel? Or they're a couple? I assume they're a couple. He considers himself immensely talented. This is third-person narration, but I'm guessing that the estimation of Annabel's meager skill would be Frederick's estimation, but I could be wrong. But she's doing all the acting and he's not getting any work. So that's very interesting. Yeah, no, this has so much depth and nuance to it, doesn't, like, I can picture Annabel, not visually, but her personality and her career. It's a fascinating dynamic within a couple. It's kind of like the Margaret Atwood and her husband Graham Gibson dynamic, you know. You know what I mean, right? And no, this one. Oh, this is okay. Yes. So, obviously, I think you can tell, the third book, book number 3, is my first pick by far. Now, what would be my second pick? Book number 1 is my second pick for sure. So book number 1 was the mom kind of spying on her son, who's making an elaborate pattern with shells and spirals. Yeah, very interested in that one too. And book number 2 is my third pick, but it's not much further behind. Like, I'm going on the one sentence that was vivid, and the fact I don't know how interested I might be in the story about an international businessman. You know, the drawback of the page 112 tag is that this might be the only page where international business is discussed. You never know, right? And this is also a dialogue-heavy page. But yeah, I once I find out more about book number 2, I'd be able to decide more. But on the basis of page 112 only, hands down, book number 3 is my first pick, and I'm very interested in book number 1 as well. So now is where I go log on my email and find out what these books are. Oh, how interesting! I always say that. So I don't know anything about any of these novels. These are all from the 1969 Man Booker. So is that that's the first year. Okay, so she's chosen from the very first year. I think 1969 was the first year. 2 of the novelists are quite familiar to me, and my first pick is one that I've read quite a bit by her, but not this book. So book number 1, which was my second pick, is an Iris Murdoch novel. So this is the second Iris Murdoch I've gotten as a blind page 112 tag. So I must read Iris Murdoch for the first time. And this novel is called The Nice and the Good. She's given me more information which I want to tell you about, but let me go through the book. So book number 2, which was my third choice, was the winner. And it's called Something to Answer For by P.H. Newby. Oh my god. Huh, okay. And book number 3, which was hands down my first pick, is a Muriel Spark novel, and I'd never heard of this title, The Public Image. And I have quite liked Muriel Spark. Any of the ones I've read, The Comforters, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and didn't she write one called The Driver or The Driver's Seat or something? Those 3 I've read. Oh, and Memento Mori. If I have time at the end, if I remember, I'll tell you. I might as well tell you now. I have a really very highly embarrassing, cringeworthy memory about Memento Mori. I read it on my own. It wasn't for a class. The other ones I read for classes. But then one summer I read Memento Mori when I was about 22, 21. And I recommended it to my 90-year-old grandmother. Maybe she was 95, 90 anyway. She was 90. I said, I really enjoyed this book. Well, Memento Mori, as Adam knows, but most of us, know, it means remember you must die. And it's this story about all these old people that are getting messages, anonymous messages in the mail and by telephone. My memory is very dim, but that to remember they must die. And I recommended this to my grandma. And she found it so depressing, and she never ever spoke to me, but she did talk to Mom about it and say, that book was horrible. It made me so depressed. Like, Sean, I was such an idiot. Why would I recommend something like that to her? So I'll go through them now in the order in which I chose them, okay, and give you some more information. So, book number 3, again, The Public Image by Muriel Spark. And Peg tells me it was set in Rome, and it's a satirical story of an actress and her many manipulations to keep her career on course. I'm not big on satire, but if it's Muriel Spark, I will definitely try it. But I love the writing here. My second pick was book number 1, and again, this is an Iris Murdoch novel, The Nice and the Good. I've never heard of that. And it's a story of a group of 5 people and their various interactions. The Sea is one of Eric Carl Anderson's favorite books, and it won the Booker in 1978, but this was nominated in 1969. So, very interesting. And the winner of the 1969, Something to Answer For by P.H. Newby. Who is P.H. Newby? Let's see what Peg tells me about him. It's a quirky historical novel about an Englishman in Egypt during the Suez Crisis, which I think was 1956, if I'm not mistaken. Full of black humor. And Peg says, Newby, though quite popular in his day, is largely forgotten now. Yes, that is true. I've never heard of him. Have you? This may have been one of the ones I remember Eric kind of rolling his eyes about some of the winners, and this may have been one of the ones he was rolling his eyes about, that it won over Muriel Spark and Iris Murdoch. So anyway, no, I wasn't interested in that one. So this was so fun. So Peg, thank you, and please send me more. In any order. I think it's interesting to do a bunch, including the winner from 1 year of the Booker, but you don't have to do them consecutively. You could do 1978 next or 1985, it doesn't matter, but keep them coming. And do you have a extra level of enjoyment when it's all Booker Prize nominees? I certainly do. As the content creator, that just adds an extra level of fascination, and I think it would be so interesting to keep doing this during this anniversary year. And which of these books would you choose to read first? Your reactions undoubtedly might be very different from mine, and I'll be very curious if any of you chose the newbie winner. Something to answer for, because yeah, that one just is a blank for me. Alright, so do I have anything else to say? If any of the others of you would be interested in sending me some blind page 112s, please let me know. Put a comment below. I have a backlog of 3 or 4 or 5 to do, so there's no rush for it, but I always welcome it because I enjoy doing these and people seem to enjoy watching them. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching.